Have you ever felt unfairly influenced in a business deal? Perhaps you felt controlled or subtly coerced in a relationship. What if the reason manipulation tactics work so well isn't just about external pressure, but your own hidden vulnerabilities? Is it even possible to achieve complete immunity from manipulation? Today, we're going to delve into the profound wisdom of Stoicism and how the ancient teachings of Marcus Aurelius can provide an impenetrable shield against manipulation in all its forms. Manipulation comes in many forms: gaslighting, guilt-tripping, emotional blackmail, the list goes on. These tactics thrive by exploiting our deepest emotions, insecurities, and desires. Think about the pervasive influence of social media, where carefully crafted images and messages constantly bombard us, subtly shaping our perceptions and desires. This relentless pursuit of external validation leaves us vulnerable to those who seek to exploit our need for approval. But there's a powerful antidote. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, offered a path to self-control, reason, and virtue in his timeless work, Meditations. In a world saturated with propaganda, marketing, and carefully crafted narratives, Aurelius' teachings may be more vital than ever. By the end of this exploration, you'll not only learn to identify manipulative tactics, but you'll also understand your own vulnerabilities, giving manipulators far less to work with. You will gain practical techniques rooted in Stoicism to cultivate inner resilience, master your emotions, and make decisions based on reason rather than impulse. We will dissect the 4 Stoic virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, and reveal how each acts as a unique shield against specific forms of manipulation. And here's the most profound insight. True and lasting freedom from manipulation arises not just from defense, but from cultivating inner virtue and living a life of unshakable purpose. Now, at this point, you might be skeptical. Can a philosophy developed centuries ago truly protect us from today's sophisticated manipulation tactics? You may feel overwhelmed or even helpless when facing subtle manipulation, struggling to identify the psychological ploys at play. It's also important to acknowledge that learning to defend yourself from manipulation can be deeply uncomfortable, forcing you to confront your own insecurities and hidden vulnerabilities. As we navigate the treacherous waters of manipulation, remember that knowledge is your first line of defense. But how can we equip ourselves with this knowledge? How do we transform ourselves from potential victims into discerning observers? The answer, according to Stoicism, lies in cultivating wisdom, the ability to distinguish truth from falsehood, and to recognize manipulation in its myriad forms. Wisdom, in the Stoic sense, is not merely about accumulating facts or mastering intellectual skills. It's about developing sound judgment and understanding the true nature of things. Manipulators thrive in environments of clouded judgment, where they can exploit cognitive biases, logical fallacies, and deceptive language to obscure the truth. They are masters of misdirection, preying on our tendency to take mental shortcuts and accept information at face value. They exploit the very nature of human cognition to their advantage. Think about it. How often do you question the information presented to you, especially if it aligns with your existing beliefs? Marcus Aurelius, in Meditations, urged himself to cultivate critical thinking and question assumptions relentlessly. He wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." This constant questioning is vital to cultivate inner wisdom and resist manipulation. Consider the implications of such a practice in everyday life. Imagine approaching every piece of information, from news headlines to advertisements to interpersonal arguments, with a discerning eye, questioning the underlying assumptions, and seeking evidence to support the claims. In doing so, you develop a clarity of thought that would render you far less susceptible to deceptive tactics. For example, consider the political arena. Politicians often use emotionally charged language and logical fallacies to sway public opinion. By recognizing these tactics, we can evaluate their arguments based on reason and evidence, rather than being swept away by their rhetoric. But this begs the question: what are some of the most common biases and fallacies that manipulators exploit, and how can we spot them in real time? One of the most insidious tactics used by manipulators is exploiting our inherent cognitive biases. Cognitive biases, those mental shortcuts our brains use to simplify information processing, can be easily exploited to influence our decisions. But here's the twist: many of these biases operate unconsciously, making us vulnerable to manipulation without even realizing it. Think of confirmation bias, our tendency to favor information that confirms our existing beliefs, or anchoring bias, where we rely too heavily on the first piece of information we receive, regardless of its accuracy. Imagine you're negotiating the price of a car. The initial price quoted by the dealer, even if inflated, sets an anchor that influences your perception of its value, making it difficult to negotiate a lower price. Similarly, in the realm of interpersonal relationships, manipulators might exploit your confirmation bias by selectively feeding you information that reinforces your insecurities, subtly undermining your self-esteem, and making you more dependent on their approval. Then there are logical fallacies, flawed arguments that seem convincing on the surface, but are actually deceptive. A common example is the straw man fallacy, where someone misrepresents their opponent's argument to make it easier to attack, or the ad hominem fallacy, where they attack the person making the argument rather than the argument itself. Another example is the appeal to emotion, when someone uses emotion instead of logic to persuade. Let's consider a modern example: media influence. News outlets often frame stories in ways that appeal to viewers' emotions, using loaded language and selective reporting to create a particular narrative. Recognizing these biases and fallacies empowers us to think critically, challenge assumptions, and make informed decisions, thereby decreasing our susceptibility to manipulation. But how do we ensure that we aren't contributing to injustice ourselves? Justice, in the Stoic framework, extends far beyond legal definitions. It encompasses fairness, equity, and moral uprightness in all our interactions. But here's the paradox: manipulators often exploit injustice and unfair power dynamics to their advantage, preying on the vulnerable and exploiting systemic inequalities. How can we be sure that we are acting justly, even when faced with manipulation? Marcus Aurelius taught that we should treat others with respect, honesty, and compassion, even when they are trying to manipulate us. This doesn't mean allowing ourselves to be exploited, but rather acting in accordance with virtue, regardless of the other person's behavior. It means holding ourselves to a higher standard, refusing to stoop to their level, and acting justly in all our dealings. This is easier said than done, of course. In situations where we feel threatened or unfairly treated, it's natural to want to retaliate or seek revenge. But true strength lies in resisting these impulses and acting in accordance with reason and virtue. Consider an example of an unjust situation: a workplace where bullying and harassment are rampant. An employee who stands up to the bully, reporting their behavior to the authorities, is acting justly, even though they may face retaliation or social ostracism. Setting boundaries is also key to protect against unfairness. Think about that relative who always asks for money but never pays it back. By learning to say no and enforce healthy boundaries, you not only protect yourself from being exploited, but also uphold the principles of justice and fairness in your relationships. Acting justly builds trust, strengthens relationships, and makes us less vulnerable to exploitation. But what happens when acting justly requires immense personal risk? Courage in Stoicism is not the absence of fear, but the ability to face fear, adversity, and manipulation with inner strength and resolve. Consider this. Manipulators often rely on intimidation, threats, and guilt-tripping to control and exploit others, creating a climate of fear and dependence. How can we cultivate the courage to stand up to these tactics? Marcus Aurelius emphasized the importance of facing challenges with resilience, perseverance, and a commitment to doing what is right, regardless of the consequences. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This inner strength is crucial when confronting manipulators, who often seek to undermine our confidence and make us doubt our own judgment. Consider the story of Rosa Parks, who refused to give up her seat on a bus, sparking the Montgomery bus boycott and galvanizing the civil rights movement. Her courageous act, in the face of systemic racism and intimidation, demonstrated the power of inner conviction and moral fortitude. Think about whistleblowers who expose corporate corruption or government misconduct, often at great personal risk. These individuals demonstrate courage by standing up for their values, even when facing threats, harassment, and social ostracism. They are driven by a deep sense of integrity and a commitment to doing what is right, regardless of the consequences. What these individuals teach us is that standing up to manipulators requires not only courage, but also a clear understanding of our values and a willingness to defend them, even when it's difficult. So how do we learn to detach ourselves from the opinions of others? Temperance, or moderation, is not about suppressing our emotions and desires, but about mastering them. Temperance enables us to govern our emotions and desires. But here's the key. Manipulators often exploit our emotions and desires, using tactics like emotional blackmail, guilt-tripping, and flattery to cloud our judgment and manipulate our behavior. Emotional blackmail involves using threats or guilt to control someone's actions. Guilt-tripping involves making someone feel guilty for not doing what you want them to do. Flattery involves excessive or insincere praise to gain someone's favor. Marcus Aurelius taught the importance of emotional regulation, self-awareness, and detaching from external validation. He wrote, "You shouldn't give circumstances the power to rouse anger, for they don't care at all." This detachment is crucial when dealing with manipulators, who often try to provoke emotional reactions in order to gain control. Consider a negotiation scenario. A skilled negotiator might use emotional tactics, such as feigning anger or disappointment, to pressure you into making concessions. By remaining calm and detached, you can avoid being swayed by their emotions and make decisions based on reason and logic. Consider also the urge to seek approval from others. Social media influencers often exploit this desire, promoting products or lifestyles that promise to make you more popular or attractive. But here's the twist. The validation you receive from external sources is fleeting and ultimately unsatisfying. By cultivating temperance, we can resist the urge to seek approval from others and make choices based on our own values and beliefs, decreasing susceptibility to manipulation. But what lies at the very core of all these techniques? What is the single most important skill to develop in order to build an impenetrable shield against manipulation? Self-awareness is the bedrock of resisting manipulation. Indeed, to know thyself is the ultimate weapon. But here's the crucial point. Before we can effectively defend ourselves against external manipulation, we must first understand our own internal vulnerabilities. What are our needs, fears, and insecurities? What are the emotional triggers that manipulators can exploit? Understanding our own vulnerabilities is not always easy. It requires honest self-reflection and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves. What are the stories you tell yourself? What are your deepest fears? What makes you feel insecure? Once you identify these vulnerabilities, you can begin to develop strategies for managing them. For example, if you know that you're susceptible to flattery, you can be more cautious when someone showers you with praise. Or, if you know that you're afraid of conflict, you can practice assertiveness techniques to stand up for yourself in difficult situations. Strategies for introspection and self-examination include journaling, meditation, and seeking feedback from trusted sources. Journaling can help you identify patterns in your thoughts and behaviors, while meditation can help you develop greater self-awareness and emotional regulation. Seeking feedback from trusted friends, family members, or therapists can provide valuable insights into your blind spots and areas for improvement. The greater awareness you possess, the more difficult it will be for others to control you. But now the question becomes, how can one cement this self-awareness and build an even stronger defense? Living a life aligned with your values and purpose provides the strongest defense against manipulation. But here's the key. When you're clear about what matters most to you, you're less likely to be swayed by external pressures or manipulated into acting against your principles. Individuals who remain true to their values in the face of intense pressure and manipulation include whistleblowers and activists. Consider the story of Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani activist who stood up for girls' education in the face of threats and violence from the Taliban. Despite facing immense pressure and danger, she remained steadfast in her commitment to her values, inspiring millions around the world. Or Nelson Mandela, who, despite decades of imprisonment, never abandoned his fight for racial equality. These individuals demonstrate the transformative power of purpose-driven living. When we're grounded in our values and committed to a cause greater than ourselves, we become virtually immune to manipulation, because we know exactly who we are and what we are fighting for. What we will discover next is the most important revelation of all: how to live a life impervious to manipulation. Now, let's consider the counterintuitive idea that the types of people one attracts are often indicative of how easily manipulated one is. Building on our discussion of purpose, a lack of self-defined purpose creates a vacuum that others will eagerly fill with their own agenda. Have you ever noticed a pattern in the types of people you attract? Do you often find yourself surrounded by those who drain your energy, constantly demand your attention, or subtly undermine your confidence? The psychological reasons behind this phenomenon are complex, but a few key concepts can help us understand it. First, there's mirroring, the subconscious tendency to be drawn to those who reflect our own traits, both positive and negative. If you harbor deep-seated insecurities, you might unconsciously seek out relationships that reinforce those insecurities, even if they're ultimately harmful. Second, there are complementary relationships, where one person's weakness is balanced by another's strength. While this can be healthy in moderation, it can also become exploitative if one person consistently takes advantage of the other's vulnerability. For example, an individual who struggles with decision-making might find themselves in a relationship with someone who is highly controlling, creating a dynamic where their autonomy is constantly undermined. But here's the most crucial element. Manipulators are naturally drawn to vulnerable targets. They possess an uncanny ability to sniff out those who are easily swayed, those who crave validation, and those who are willing to sacrifice their own needs for the sake of others. Think about it. A skilled con artist doesn't target the savvy investor. They target the naive and inexperienced. Similarly, in the realm of interpersonal relationships, manipulators seek out individuals who are lacking in self-worth, boundaries, or self-awareness. Consider a few illustrative examples of this dynamic in action. A person with weak boundaries might attract demanding or entitled friends who constantly take advantage of their generosity, always asking for favors, borrowing money without repaying it, or monopolizing their time and energy. Or an insecure individual might attract a controlling or possessive partner who exploits their need for validation, constantly criticizing their appearance, monitoring their social interactions, or isolating them from their support network. Someone who constantly complains about being used often attracts narcissists, since the narcissist now has a constant supply of self-pity and opportunities to feel superior. Conversely, someone who is always giving advice, but never takes it themselves, will attract people who are lost and looking for guidance, but who will ultimately not succeed because they will not follow through. The implications of this dynamic for personal growth are profound. The patterns in our relationships often reflect underlying issues, such as a lack of self-worth, poor boundaries, or unmet needs. By changing your own behavior and cultivating self-respect, you can begin to attract healthier, more supportive relationships. Building self-awareness is key, and setting clear boundaries is essential. But it goes even deeper than that. What if the qualities we find humorous also reveal vulnerabilities? People with a poor sense of humor often attract very negative, serious people, and a lack of humor can be a significant vulnerability to manipulation. Is humor truly a sign of inner strength? Can the ability to laugh at oneself and the world around us actually provide a shield against those who seek to exploit us? Humor, psychologically and socially, serves several vital functions. It diffuses tension, creates social bonds, and even challenges authority. Think about how a well-timed joke can diffuse a tense argument, or how shared laughter can create a sense of connection and camaraderie. But a lack of humor can indicate rigidity, inflexibility, and a tendency to take oneself and others far too seriously. And that seriousness can be exploited. A manipulator might exploit this seriousness by playing on your sense of duty, guilt, or fear, knowing that you're less likely to challenge their authority or question their motives. But here's the twist. The ability to find humor in difficult situations can create emotional distance and challenge power dynamics, preventing manipulators from gaining a foothold. Consider a few examples of how humor can be used to deflect manipulative tactics. You might use self-deprecating humor to disarm criticism and prevent others from using shame as a control tactic, poking fun at your own flaws before they can be used against you. You could employ witty remarks to challenge manipulative statements or expose logical fallacies, gently ridiculing the absurdity of their arguments. You can use humor to lighten tense situations and prevent emotional escalation, diffusing potentially explosive conflicts with a well-placed joke. Or you could respond to a guilt trip with a joke, making it clear that the other person's emotional blackmail is not going to work on you. Cultivating a sense of humor builds resilience, promotes emotional intelligence, and fosters healthier relationships. It allows you to maintain perspective, avoid taking yourself too seriously, and resist the urge to be controlled by others. But what happens when someone carries deep wounds that make them even more susceptible to these tactics? We now enter a much darker area. Trauma can leave deep scars that make individuals far more vulnerable to manipulation. I want to acknowledge the gravity of this topic, as it touches on sensitive and often painful experiences. But it's important to understand how past trauma can create vulnerabilities that manipulators exploit. Unresolved trauma can lead to low self-esteem, difficulty setting boundaries, a tendency to people-please, and an attraction to familiar, but unhealthy, relationship dynamics that mirror past experiences of abuse or neglect. To elaborate, if someone experienced abuse or neglect in childhood, they might unconsciously seek out similar dynamics in their adult relationships, mistaking familiarity for love or connection. They may also struggle to assert their needs or set healthy boundaries, fearing that doing so will lead to rejection or abandonment. Manipulators, with their keen ability to detect vulnerability, can exploit these deeply ingrained patterns. They prey on individuals who are seeking validation, healing, or a sense of control, offering a false sense of security and understanding. Consider some of the manipulative tactics used in these situations. Love bombing, where the manipulator showers the victim with excessive attention and affection early in the relationship, creating a sense of intense dependency. Idealization, where the manipulator places the victim on a pedestal, praising their every move and making them feel like they've finally found their soulmate. Isolation from support networks, where the manipulator gradually isolates the victim from their friends and family, making them more dependent on the manipulator for emotional support and validation. And of course, gaslighting, where the manipulator distorts the victim's reality and undermines their self-trust, making them question their sanity and rely on the manipulator's version of events. Often, the manipulator will promise that the new partner will heal the old wounds and provide a sense of security that was lacking in the past, making these tactics all the more effective. Navigating life after trauma requires immense courage and self-compassion. Seeking professional help is essential, as is developing self-compassion, setting healthy boundaries, and breaking free from patterns of abuse and exploitation. It all starts with self-awareness, recognizing how past experiences are influencing present behavior. But what if someone, even without a history of trauma, refuses help, choosing to remain isolated in their struggles? Refusing help or counsel from others can also be a sign that someone is easily manipulated. Why do some people stubbornly resist outside perspectives, preferring to struggle alone rather than seek assistance? Is it a sign of strength or a subtle vulnerability? This refusal often stems from a combination of pride, fear of vulnerability, and a belief that one can, or should, handle everything on their own. But here's the paradox: this self-reliance can be exploited. Manipulators can exploit this self-reliance by isolating individuals from their support networks, undermining their trust in others, and presenting themselves as the only source of reliable information or assistance. Consider an employee who refuses help from colleagues, believing that they must handle everything themselves, and becomes overwhelmed and exploited by a demanding boss. Or think about an individual who rejects advice from family and friends, convinced that they know best, and falls prey to a scam or fraudulent scheme. Consider a leader who refuses to listen to his trusted advisors, blinded by their own ego, and is ultimately overthrown by those seeking to exploit their hubris. Seeking and accepting help requires humility, open-mindedness, and a willingness to acknowledge our limitations. It involves building a strong support system and recognizing the value of diverse perspectives. But what if, rather than rejecting help, someone is simply too eager to please, too agreeable to stand their ground? We'll turn to that next, as we continue to explore these subtle vulnerabilities. Is it possible to be too agreeable? We've explored how trauma and other vulnerabilities can make individuals susceptible to manipulation. But could a seemingly positive trait like agreeableness also be a liability? We often value agreeableness in our society. We praise those who are cooperative, accommodating, and willing to go along with the group. But perhaps excessive agreeableness, stemming from a deep-seated need for approval or fear of conflict, makes someone a prime target for manipulators. After all, a doormat invites people to walk all over it. Excessive agreeableness can manifest in several ways, each creating vulnerabilities. A lack of clear boundaries emerges when individuals struggle to define their limits and assert their needs, often blurring the lines between helpfulness and self-sacrifice. The tendency to prioritize others' needs over one's own leads to neglecting one's own well-being, desires, and goals, creating an imbalance where one person consistently gives while the other takes. There's also the difficulty of saying no, which is a cornerstone of healthy boundaries, but for agreeable individuals, no can feel like a forbidden word, leading to overcommitment and resentment. As a result, Agreeableness leads to a vulnerability to being taken advantage of by manipulators who exploit this desire to please, recognizing that these individuals are less likely to resist their demands. They'll spot the easy marks immediately. Manipulators target agreeable individuals with calculated precision, exploiting their inherent desire to please and avoid conflict. They begin by making unreasonable requests, knowing that the agreeable individual will struggle to say no, even if it inconveniences them. Then they start using guilt trips or emotional blackmail to pressure them into compliance, preying on their fear of disappointing others and leveraging emotional manipulation to get their way. The exploitation gradually erodes their boundaries over time. What starts as a small favor can escalate into a pattern of exploitation, as the manipulator tests the limits of the agreeable individual's tolerance. Cultivating healthy boundaries requires a shift in mindset, a conscious effort to prioritize self-respect, assertiveness, and recognition of one's own needs and priorities. Self-respect is the foundation. It involves valuing oneself and one's own well-being, recognizing that one's needs are just as important as those of others. Then comes assertiveness, which is the ability to communicate one's needs and boundaries clearly and respectfully, without aggression or defensiveness. After all, learning to say no without guilt or explanation is paramount. Marcus Aurelius reminds us in Meditations to practice self-control and inner resilience, not to be tossed about by every wind that blows. Only by recognizing the importance of setting our own course and prioritizing our own needs alongside the needs of others can we truly embody the strength that Aurelius describes. But there's another unexpected factor at play. Is it possible to be too focused on being right? Can the pursuit of correctness become a weakness? A strong need to always be right, often rooted in insecurity or a desire for control, can paradoxically make someone susceptible to manipulation. The need to be right can manifest as a closed-mindedness to alternative perspectives, blinding the individual to new information or insights that challenge their existing beliefs. It breeds a defensiveness in the face of criticism. Constructive feedback is perceived as a personal attack, leading to resistance and a refusal to consider alternative viewpoints. Incessant arguing becomes the norm, as the individual feels compelled to debate every point, even if it's inconsequential, turning every conversation into a battleground. And perhaps most dangerously, it creates a vulnerability to being manipulated by those who exploit this desire to be seen as intelligent or knowledgeable. Manipulators can exploit this need by setting up straw man arguments that the individual feels compelled to refute, knowing that they can easily dismantle a distorted or exaggerated version of the opposing viewpoint. They appeal to their ego by flattering their intelligence or expertise, inflating their sense of self-importance and making them more susceptible to influence. They use gotcha tactics to make them appear foolish or uninformed, leveraging their fear of embarrassment to manipulate their behavior or force them into compliance. Distorting information to confirm the individual's existing biases and beliefs exploits their desire to be right, reinforcing their worldview and making them resistant to alternative perspectives. For example, a news website might use selective reporting to cater to a specific audience, amplifying their existing beliefs and prejudices. Cultivating intellectual humility becomes key, because it is the antidote to this vulnerability. That starts with open-mindedness, a willingness to consider alternative perspectives and challenge one's own assumptions. Admitting when one is wrong is important. Being able to acknowledge one's mistakes demonstrates intellectual honesty and a commitment to learning, fostering trust and respect. A focus on learning and understanding rather than winning arguments is required. Shifting the focus from ego-driven competition to genuine inquiry allows for intellectual growth and a more collaborative approach to problem solving. And finally, Recognizing that it is okay to not know everything is crucial. Embracing uncertainty and accepting the limits of one's knowledge fosters humility and a willingness to learn from others. The Stoics would agree with this. This relates directly to Stoic wisdom. By accepting the uncertainty of life, we can relinquish some of the need to be right. We come to realize that we cannot know everything, and so we open ourselves up to truly learning. And by opening ourselves up to learning, we gain wisdom, which makes us less susceptible to manipulation. But what about the modern phenomenon of FOMO, that gnawing feeling that everyone else is having a better time? Could a fear of missing out make someone very easy to manipulate? FOMO, or the fear of missing out, is a powerful social and psychological phenomenon that has been amplified by social media. The constant exposure to curated versions of other people's lives can trigger a sense of anxiety and inadequacy, making individuals feel like they are missing out on something important. This feeling can drive impulsive decision-making, a susceptibility to social pressure, and a desire to conform to trends or expectations, creating a vulnerability to being manipulated by those who exploit this fear of being left out. This is the essence of modern advertising. Manipulators exploit FOMO by creating a sense of scarcity or urgency. Limited time offers, flash sales, and exclusive events are designed to create a sense of urgency, prompting individuals to act quickly before the opportunity disappears. Social proof or testimonials are often used to promote products or services, leveraging the bandwagon effect and convincing individuals that they need to participate in order to fit in. Manipulators also appeal to the desire for status or belonging, promising that their product or service will elevate the individual's social standing or grant them access to an exclusive community. Finally, they create exclusive opportunities that seem too good to pass up, often involving high-pressure sales tactics and limited availability, further intensifying the fear of missing out. Cultivating contentment and gratitude is key. Those who practice thankfulness regularly find it easier to focus on the present moment, which allows us to appreciate what one already has. Recognizing that true happiness comes from within allows us to resist the urge to compare oneself to others. By taking these steps, it becomes far easier to resist the tactics of manipulators who are trying to exploit our FOMO. As Marcus Aurelius emphasized, true freedom lies not in external possessions or experiences, but in inner peace and self-sufficiency. But here's a somewhat fatalistic, yet ultimately empowering, idea. Manipulation attempts are an unavoidable part of life. You can't control other people's actions, but you can control your reactions. Accepting this reality can be your greatest defense. Manipulators will always exist. Their behavior is driven by psychological factors such as a need for control, a lack of empathy, and a desire for power or gain. While we might wish for a world free of manipulation, it's crucial to acknowledge the darker aspects of human nature and recognize that these individuals will always be among us. For example, history is filled with examples of charismatic leaders who have used manipulation to gain power, often with devastating consequences. Some con artists and scam artists rely on deception and manipulation to exploit vulnerable individuals for financial gain. Accepting this reality can be freeing. It allows individuals to stop blaming themselves for being targeted. Instead, it allows focus on building their own resilience and defenses. It encourages approaching interactions with a healthy dose of skepticism, recognizing that not everyone has their best interests at heart. It makes it easier to recognize that manipulation is not a reflection of their worth or intelligence, detaching their self-esteem from the actions of others. Ultimately, this acceptance fosters self-compassion, forgiveness, both of oneself and of others, a focus on what one can control, thoughts, actions, reactions, and letting go of the need to change or control others. The Stoics had it right. By accepting what is beyond our control and focusing on our inner virtues, we can create a life of peace and resilience even in the face of manipulation. But we're just scratching the surface here. What comes next might be the most important revelation of all. Stay with me. Could those who manipulate us actually be reflecting parts of ourselves? It's a provocative idea that the very people who seem to exploit our weaknesses are, in a way, holding up a mirror to our own hidden desires, fears, and insecurities. But consider this. Manipulators are often incredibly skilled at detecting and exploiting these hidden aspects, suggesting that those insecurities and desires were already present, lying dormant within us, waiting to be triggered. This isn't to excuse their behavior, but to understand the complex interplay of internal vulnerabilities and external manipulation. This mirroring effect works through several key psychological mechanisms. First, there's projection, where we unconsciously attribute our own unacceptable thoughts, feelings, or motives to another person. For instance, an individual who constantly accuses others of being selfish may, in fact, be projecting their own repressed selfishness onto them. This projection can make us particularly vulnerable to manipulation, as we may be blind to our own flaws and more likely to believe the manipulator's false accusations. Then, there's the shadow self, a concept popularized by Carl Jung, which refers to the repressed or disowned aspects of our personality that we deny or reject. These shadow traits can make us vulnerable to those who embody them, as we may be both attracted to and repelled by these individuals. Someone who is drawn to chaotic relationships might be unconsciously trying to integrate the chaos of their shadow self. Finally, there are unmet needs, our deep-seated desires for love, acceptance, or security. Manipulators, like skilled predators, can sense this vulnerability and exploit it by offering false promises of fulfilling these needs, leading us down a path of manipulation. Someone longing for approval might be willing to do anything to please a manipulator who offers empty praise. Recognizing this mirroring effect can be a powerful catalyst for personal growth. It starts with self-reflection, honestly examining our own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors to identify any hidden desires, fears, or insecurities that may be making us vulnerable. Then comes shadow work, integrating these disowned aspects of ourselves, learning to accept and manage the darker sides of our personality. Addressing our unmet needs in healthy ways is paramount. Rather than seeking validation from external sources, we can cultivate self-acceptance and compassion. For example, practicing mindfulness and meditation can help us become more aware of our thoughts and feelings, allowing us to identify and address any underlying vulnerabilities. By acknowledging and integrating these shadow aspects of our personality, we diminish their power over us, making us less susceptible to manipulation. The first step to being truly immune to manipulation is acknowledging that you are susceptible to it. But are those who think they're immune most at risk? Claiming absolute immunity to manipulation is, paradoxically, a sign of increased vulnerability. This illusion of immunity often stems from a potent cocktail of overconfidence, denial, a distinct lack of self-awareness, and a steadfast belief in one's own invulnerability. Those who believe they are too smart, too experienced, or too virtuous to be manipulated are often the easiest targets, precisely because they let their guard down. This belief blinds them to the subtle tactics that manipulators employ, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. It's a classic case of hubris leading to a fall, much like the tragic heroes of ancient Greek plays who were undone by their own pride. Manipulators are adept at exploiting this false sense of security. They might start by using reverse psychology, challenging the individual's intelligence or independence to provoke a reaction. They might shower the individual with flattery, inflating their ego and making them more susceptible to influence. They might create situations where the individual feels compelled to prove their immunity, leading them to make rash decisions or take unnecessary risks. Over time, they'll gradually erode their defenses over time with carefully calculated moves. For instance, a con artist might target a seasoned negotiator by initially presenting a seemingly legitimate deal, then slowly introducing more and more unreasonable terms, knowing that the negotiator will be hesitant to admit they were fooled. There are numerous real-world examples of this dynamic. Consider a seasoned negotiator who becomes overconfident after a string of successful deals, only to fall prey to a clever scam because they underestimated their opponent. Or a self-proclaimed expert who is easily swayed by misinformation because they believe their own expertise is unassailable. Or a leader who becomes isolated because he believes he is the only one with the right answers, making him vulnerable to manipulation by those who surround him. Embracing vulnerability, therefore, isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength and self-awareness. Cultivating humility is the antidote to this vulnerability. It requires openness to feedback, a willingness to learn from mistakes, and recognizing that everyone is susceptible to influence, regardless of their intelligence, experience, or status. This is precisely why Marcus Aurelius emphasizes the importance of accepting what is beyond our control. We cannot control the actions of others, but we can control our reactions. By embracing vulnerability and cultivating humility, we become less susceptible to manipulation and more resilient in the face of adversity. It is difficult to know when you are being manipulated, but focusing on how you feel after interactions is a good place to start. Can your gut feeling be a warning sign? Our intuition acts as an internal guidance system, alerting us to manipulation even when we can't consciously identify it. It's that nagging feeling of unease, the subtle sense that something is off, even when we can't quite put our finger on what it is. Manipulators often create a sense of unease, discomfort, or cognitive dissonance, which is a state of mental discomfort caused by holding conflicting beliefs or values. This discomfort triggers our intuition, sending up red flags that something is amiss. It might manifest as a knot in your stomach, a feeling of anxiety, or a general sense of distrust. Recognizing and trusting these intuitive signals can be a powerful defense against manipulation. Tuning into your intuition requires paying close attention to your physical and emotional responses to interactions. Notice feelings of anxiety, guilt, or obligation that arise during or after a conversation. Trust your gut feeling, even when it doesn't make logical sense. It's often a culmination of subtle cues and unspoken signals that our conscious mind hasn't yet processed. Learning to differentiate between genuine empathy and manipulative emotional ploys is essential. A genuine connection feels supportive and empowering, while manipulation leaves you feeling drained and indebted. There are practical techniques for developing your intuition, such as meditation, journaling, spending time in nature, and practicing mindfulness. Meditation quiets the mind and allows us to access our inner wisdom, and journaling helps us process our thoughts and feelings, identifying patterns and triggers. Spending time in nature can be incredibly grounding, connecting us to our natural instincts and enhancing our intuition. Practicing mindfulness allows us to be fully present in the moment, paying attention to our thoughts, feelings, and sensations without judgment. Each of these tools can assist in recognizing when someone is trying to take advantage of you. Consider feeling a sense of unease during a sales pitch, despite the salesperson's charm and persuasive arguments, and deciding to walk away, trusting your intuition that something isn't right. Or noticing inconsistencies in someone's story and questioning their motives, even if you can't immediately identify the lie. Or sensing that someone is trying to pressure you into a decision and choosing to delay, giving yourself time to reflect and consult with trusted sources. By trusting your intuition, you are empowering yourself. Trusting your intuition has profound implications for long-term well-being because it leads to self-trust, boundary setting, and making decisions that align with your values. It helps us avoid situations that could be harmful or exploitative. By listening to our inner voice, we can create a life that is more authentic, fulfilling, and aligned with our true selves. But there's another factor at play here: knowing your weaknesses so that you do not fall prey to giving in to your addictions. Can addiction be used as a manipulative tool? Manipulators often exploit our addictions, not just substance-related ones, but also behavioral addictions, to gain control. Addiction, in its broadest sense, creates a vulnerability by impacting judgment and decision-making, creating a strong craving that overrides other concerns, and making individuals willing to do things they normally wouldn't do. This diminished control and heightened impulsivity make addicts particularly susceptible to manipulation. The addiction becomes a lever that the manipulator can use to exert influence and extract compliance. There are numerous examples of addictions that can be exploited, including substance abuse, where a manipulator provides drugs or alcohol to lower inhibitions and gain influence. Gambling, where a manipulator encourages risky bets to create financial dependence. Sex or pornography, where a manipulator uses sexual favors or images to gain control. Social media, where a manipulator exploits the need for validation to gain power. It's easy to see how these tactics play out in real time. In these situations, manipulators employ tactics such as enabling, supporting the addiction to maintain control. They use guilt tripping, making the individual feel bad for indulging in their addiction, then offering relief. They engage in isolation, separating the individual from support systems to increase dependence. And finally, they resort to exploitation, using the addiction as leverage to extract favors or compliance. For example, a manipulator might threaten to expose someone's gambling addiction to their family unless they comply with their demands. This is a potent form of coercion because it preys on the individual's deepest fears and insecurities. Recognizing and addressing addictions is crucial. This requires self-awareness, acknowledging the existence and impact of the addiction, then seeking professional help, building a strong support system, connecting with others who understand and can provide encouragement, and developing healthy coping mechanisms for managing cravings and triggers. By addressing the underlying addiction, individuals can reclaim their power and resist the tactics of manipulators. Sometimes, not forgiving people can make you easily manipulated. Does holding on to anger give others power over you? A lack of forgiveness makes one more susceptible to manipulation. Unforgiveness leads to bitterness, resentment, a persistent focus on the past, and a vulnerability to being manipulated by those who exploit these negative emotions. Holding on to grudges creates an emotional burden that weighs us down and clouds our judgment, making us more susceptible to manipulation. It's like carrying a heavy weight on our shoulders, hindering our ability to move forward and see things clearly. This state of emotional distress makes us vulnerable to those who can exploit our pain. Manipulators exploit this unforgiveness by reminding individuals of past hurts, using guilt trips to manipulate their behavior, and creating situations where the individual feels compelled to seek revenge. An ex-spouse who uses the children to manipulate the other parent because of unresolved anger from the divorce. An employee who sabotages a colleague's work because of a past grievance. The manipulator understands that these wounds haven't healed, and he uses them to gain control. It's a vicious cycle of pain and manipulation. Practicing forgiveness is the key. Letting go of anger and resentment, focusing on the present, and building healthier relationships. It's not about condoning the actions of others, but about freeing oneself from the emotional burden of unforgiveness. It aligns with Stoic principles of acceptance and inner peace, recognizing that we cannot change the past, but we can choose how we respond to it. The Stoics believed that holding onto anger was a form of self-inflicted harm, because it robbed us of our inner tranquility. But what if the key to resisting manipulation lies in something far more profound than just defensive strategies? What if the true secret is to cultivate a life so rich in purpose and virtue that manipulation simply loses its power? Stay with me, because what comes next might be the most important revelation of all. As we reach the end of our exploration into the subtle and pervasive world of manipulation, it's important to acknowledge the journey we've undertaken together. This isn't merely an intellectual exercise. It's a profound inquiry into the human condition, a quest for self-awareness and resilience. Let's pause and reflect on what we've uncovered, because the true power of this knowledge lies not just in understanding, but in application. In essence, we've seen how manipulation, in its various forms, can insidiously erode our autonomy and distort our perception of reality. But we've also discovered a powerful antidote, the timeless wisdom of Stoicism. By cultivating self-awareness, mastering our emotions, and aligning ourselves with virtue, we can build an impenetrable shield against manipulative tactics. The four Stoic virtues, wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, are not abstract ideals. They are practical tools for navigating the complexities of human interaction and safeguarding our inner peace. Remember the initial question we posed: is complete immunity to manipulation truly possible? While absolute perfection remains an unattainable ideal, the path toward greater resilience is always open to us. Just as a skilled martial artist anticipates and deflects an attack, we can learn to recognize the warning signs of manipulation and respond with Stoic equanimity. The key, as we've emphasized throughout this journey, lies in unwavering self-awareness. And keep in mind that the types of people you surround yourself with, or whom you attract, is a good indication of how easily manipulated you are. But here is the ultimate insight, the most profound truth we've uncovered. The most effective defense against manipulation isn't a set of defensive strategies, but a life firmly grounded in values and purpose. When we live authentically, guided by our inner compass and committed to doing what is right, external pressures lose their grip on us. Consider the paradox of control. The more we try to control external circumstances and other people's actions, the more vulnerable we become to disappointment and manipulation. Conversely, the more we cultivate self-control and inner strength, the less controllable we become by external forces. The implications of this understanding extend far beyond our individual lives. Imagine a world where leaders are guided by ethical principles, where citizens are empowered to think critically, and where relationships are built on mutual respect and genuine connection. Such a world would be far less susceptible to manipulation and exploitation, fostering greater justice, equity, and compassion for all. But what about the ethical implications of manipulation itself? Is it ever justified to manipulate others, even for a seemingly good cause? This is a question that demands careful consideration, for the line between persuasion and manipulation can often be blurred. Therefore, let's embrace an empowering truth. You have the capacity for growth, for change, and for cultivating the Stoic virtues that will protect you from manipulation. This is a lifelong journey that will take time, effort, and unwavering commitment. There will be setbacks along the way, moments of doubt and uncertainty, times when you stumble and fall. But these challenges are not signs of failure. They are opportunities for growth. Remember, you need to be responsible for your own life and not blame others. This is about taking ownership of your choices, your emotions, and your actions. So, as you navigate the complexities of life, I encourage you to reflect on your own vulnerabilities. Identify the areas where you are most susceptible to manipulation. What are your triggers? What are your unmet needs? What are the values that guide your decisions? Consider the ethical implications of influence and strive to build relationships based on honesty and respect. Finally, let us remember that Stoicism is not merely a set of techniques or strategies. It's a philosophy for living a more virtuous and meaningful life. It's a path toward inner peace, resilience, and unwavering integrity. It's a journey that will empower you to withstand the challenges that manipulators may throw your way, and to emerge stronger, wiser, and more authentic than ever before.